Welcome to the channel. So today I'm going through the basics of how to use a trimming knife. Didn't think there was a video required for something as basic as this, but having seen a family member yesterday trying to break off a segment of this blade and nearly cut themselves, I decided to do a short video. So these trimming knives come in all different sizes. This is about the smallest, which is a 9mm width on the blade, but they all work in almost identical ways. So you've got a retractable sharp blade, which is retracted using this device on the end, this locking mechanism on the end. So you can push the blade in and out. As I said, hopefully the camera can pick this up, but the blade has a shallow cut at regular sections which allow you to break little bits off. The sliding mechanism here has two positions. One is in this closed position where you can freely move the blade up and down this sort of serrated edge. The second thing is at the back of this mechanism you've got a piece which can slide out, and what that will do is it will lock the blade in place. So at its widest point, or when it's pushed open, that's in a locked position. When this back piece is pushed in to join up with the front piece, that's in a position where the blade can freely move in and out. Okay, so we know how to extend and retract the blade, and pushing this back section away from the front, we know how to lock it into place. So how do we use it? So each one of these segments is almost like an independent blade or an individual blade. These come into their own, these kind of trimming knives with this snap-off blade. Obviously, when you only use this small one section of blade, then you're able to snap off that section and the blade returns to razor sharp again. So the idea behind these trimming knives is that you trim either paper or fabric. Paper if you're decorating, ideal for that. We only normally extend just one section, although you can extend more, but just make sure that you're only using this first section of blade to work with. If you use more than that section, then there's no point really having this type of knife. This comes into its own obviously when we're able to snap pieces off. So the reason for doing this video and looking at this family member, how they were using it, one of the things they were doing wrong is they were extending the blade about that far, and this is while they were decorating, and they were sawing down paper, so using maybe 7 or 8 sections of blade in order to cut the paper, and paper doesn't sound like it's going to dull the actual blade, but it will. These although these knives are very sharp, they're also very fragile, and especially embossed paper is enough to dull the blade. So if you're going to extend the cutting surface to more than one section of blade, you're really defeating the object of having this type of blade. So what I like to do is just extend one section of blade to make sure that I'm only using that blade to cut with, and then we sort of go in at a 45-degree angle to cut what we're doing, and I normally use these just for decorating. So once we've used, let's say we are decorating, we are cutting paper that's obviously got wallpaper paste on it. As we're cutting through the paper, if the wallpaper then starts to gather up after a while, you know that this blade has become blunt. It's a good indication that the blade is starting to blunt. What we'll do then is snap off this section, get a fresh section, so extend to the second section, and then carry on the cut. These blades are only really good for 1 or 2 cuts. even on paper, before they start to blunt. So how do we now snap off the blade in a safe manner to use the next section of blade along the blade length? So another reason for doing this video is because what the family member was doing is turning the blade flat or turning the knife flat and pushing down as hard as they could to try and snap the blade. That is not the way to snap these pieces of blade off. The way to do it is we expose just one section of the blade, and if you see the shape of the end of the knife, it's angled, so that angle is in line with the score mark on the blade itself. So we expose one section of blade. On the back side of these knives we have a piece which we can pull out, and the camera won't pick this up, but in all of these types of blades where you have this or all these types of knives where you have this snap off blade, in the end of the actual knife itself, this section that I've just pulled out, there is a slot in there, and the blade actually goes into that. Now the thing about the blade itself is, on one side you can see the score marks where the blade is in sections, and on the other side those score marks are very faint. The way to snap the piece of blade off is to just extend it by one section. We take the other end of the knife with that slot section in there, like that, point it away from us, and then we snap. So with these score marks prominent, we want to snap that way, so we're always snapping away from the score mark. So we expose one section, we put the end of the blade, or the section of blade, into the end of the knife, turn it away from us, snap. That's the section of blade snapped off, and we now have a fresh section of blade in which to carry on the cut. And then the end of the knife just gets put back in, clips back into place. Obviously we want to dispose of this correctly, so put it into a piece of tissue and into the bin. So the last thing with these cheap trimming knives is whether we want to use it as a disposable item. So when we get to the bottom of the blade or to the end of the blade, having snapped so many sections off, we could then dispose of this and get another one. So these are about 79p each, so they are fairly disposable. Or we can buy a pack of blades in order to reuse the casing, just put a new blade in, and these blades work out about 34p each. So in this particular cartridge that is sealed, we just snap this cover back to expose the blade. So what I'm going to show you now is how to actually change the blade if you feel like you want to go down that route. So we expose this back and we slide out one of the blades. And what you notice about the blade, and obviously be very careful with it, is it has a hole at one end. So we take our casing, our knife casing, remove the end as we did when we were snapping the sections of blade off. Make sure this is in the unlocked position, which is both pieces together, and then we slide this back all the way until it actually comes out of the knife casing. Remove the old blade, like that, and then you probably won't be able to see this, but there's actually a fixing point in there, So to put the new blade in, we take the holder. If you need to, just refresh your memory on how this actually fits into the knife casing. So this hatched area goes in like that. So that is how the blade will fit into the carrier. So we put the blade in, we make sure that the hole in the blade is on the locking piece. Do that again, like that. The blade then gets slid into the casing. Like that. And then obviously we push the end of the casing in to unlock it into place. And then that is now ready to use again. It's entirely up to you whether you buy fresh blades or you just use this as a disposable item. The larger trimming knives, obviously it does make sense to replace the blade because they're a lot more expensive. So that's it. Basic functions of a trimming knife. Hope you found that useful.